for those of you that have just joined, my name is Dave Hodge. I'm president of Zimtu Capital Corp, the hosts for this meeting, and we do intend on hosting similar meetings, both for commerce and for other companies that are in the Zimtu portfolio. We've got a couple of new things coming up that are very exciting for Zimtu, and as I've been promoting the inner circle, because we're working on a deal where we're going to save the world's turtles. So when you get an email that invites you to a Zoom meeting to save the world's turtles, make sure you sign up. The basic format will be that once I'm finished this opening presentation, there'll be a 5-second lag or so where Michael will mute everybody so that we can get the clearest presentation from the presenters. And during that period, if you want to ask a question, just wave your hand, or you can use a couple of the features that are included in Zoom. One of those features allows you to type a question that will be displayed to the presenter. I think it gets displayed to everybody, so make sure it's moderately polite. At this point, I'd like to turn the meeting over to the guy that really runs Commerce Resources, Mr. Chris Grove, and we'll have a few-second delay while Michael does his trick.
Thank you. Just give me 1 second.
Vielleicht, maybe I'm going to introduce, I'm going to welcome all the German audience. Schönen guten Tag auch von meiner Seite aus dem Stein am Rhein in der Schweiz. Und für diejenigen, die mich noch nicht kennen sollten, mein Name ist Stefan Bogner und ich bin von Roxon Research, wo ich regelmäßig über börsengelistete Unternehmen schreibe. Jetzt für alle deutschsprachigen Teilnehmer heute, sollten Sie im Anschluss an die Präsentation irgendeine Frage haben, die Sie lieber auf Deutsch stellen wollen, dann werde ich Ihnen diese gerne auf Englisch übersetzen. Und dazu melden Sie sich einfach nach der Präsentation. Und jetzt gebe ich wieder zurück an das Wort an den Präsidenten.
Grüezi miteinander.
Sehr gut, alles klar. Let's go.
Okay, I'm just having a difficulty finding Chris Grove in the... Chris, where are you?
Isn't that the only guy we need?
Exactly. Hold on.
Yes, President.
Chris, you did change your name, right?
Yeah.
He can't say anything though.
He's called President Chris Grove in the name.
Start with President.
He's in the P.
Darren, if you can find him and unmute him, I'm not sure. Hold on for a second. Sorry, everybody. Where's Chris?
Chris is in the middle. He is there.
Oh no, I need to find him on a side panel here. Actually, maybe. Hold on. That's an idea.
On the P.
Chris, wave so I can see you.
He can unmute himself.
I see him, but he has to unmute himself.
I'm unmuted now.
Okay, good.
I didn't realize I had the capability. It's
okay, Chris, go ahead. Sorry about that, everybody.
It's good to find out you've got superpowers, such as being able to unmute yourself. Welcome. Thank you all for attending today. Dave, thank you for the introduction. It's a great pleasure to speak to you all today. And I see some faces putting faces to names that I've spoken to for years and years. It has been 16 years that I've been with the company, 21 years as a shareholder. And so I can certainly commiserate or understand the frustrations of shareholders over the last 20 years that the company's been public. And it's been an absolute pleasure to be the president of the company for the last 6 years. I'd like to say at this point, besides this social setting, this social media presentation, this ability to share with you information, which is really what it's all about, for you to ask questions and for us to answer them, for us to give you an update on the micros and the macros of the rare earth element sector. I would also like to touch on the shared sense of anxiety that arguably we're all feeling at this point in time. Now, this is not something that just you and I feel when we go to the grocery store and we worry about somebody getting too close to us as they're going for their organic bananas. This is also something that's felt by everyone everywhere. And at the end of the day, the corporations, the industrial players, the manufacturers, and the governments, at the end of the day, they're all human beings like you and me. Yes, they put their pants on one leg at a time. But when they put their pants on, they direct capital. And ultimately, it is these individuals, it is these organizations, it is these governments that are feeling the same sense of anxiety. And I don't want to be seen as being guilty of China bashing. But yes, the issue essentially comes down to that everyone on planet Earth is looking for an alternate source for rare earth elements so that they don't have to continue to be dependent upon the Chinese. And in terms of that, the Americans, one of my forebears, Samuel Bigler, signed into Ellis Island in 1787. So I do have American forebears, and they lived in Michigan, in Bad Axe, Michigan, before they were convinced to come up to Saskatchewan for free land. What a great deal. But at any rate, my family, my immediate family is from Saskatchewan. But at any rate, the bottom line is that the Americans have arguably been somewhat laissez-faire in terms of stockpiling materials, or in terms of securing stable supplies. Maybe stable is the wrong word, but my point is that the Americans have never been more anxious and more intent upon finding an alternate source of supply than they are right now. Now, I am looking forward to giving you more updates on this, and in specifics, the Canada-US Joint Action Plan, which is being worked on both sides of the border. As some of you may know, we had an engagement with the Washington-based lobbyist Jeff Green for a couple of years, 2012 through 2014, and Jeff and I stay in contact. Jeff is a significant shareholder of Commerce Resources as well, by the way. And the point is that Jeff will advise me as to when capital is actually being deployed in the Canada-US Joint Action Plan, and then at that point we will engage Jeff again and we'll look to source some of that capital that is being deployed for the purpose of helping the Americans to reduce or eliminate their current and total dependency upon China. So there may be specific questions about that, but in terms of the macros of rare earth elements as well, let me also make it very clear that some very fundamental sea changes have happened since we released our first set of economics in 2012. One of the most important ones that is macro, global, is that the continued demand for rare earth elements continues to increase. While for most of the last 8 years, prices fell from their ridiculous stratospheric heights after, of course, the Chinese cut off all supply to the world's second largest market, Japan. So a lot of investors look at the rare earth element sector and are confused because falling prices usually means falling demand. That's not true. The demand for rare earth elements has increased every day, every year since 2010, since ever, basically. And the other major things that have happened that I would like to point out are that when the prices, for example, dysprosium went from $90 a kilo to $3,000 a kilo in a matter of months, the planet then reacted as it would normally, and the planet tried to design out dysprosium because who could afford to use dysprosium at $3,000 a kilo? Now, having said that, dysprosium still is used in permanent magnets, but its percentage input is down to about 1%, whereas in 2009, it was approximately 13%. So part of the business plan, I would suggest that makes sense, is focusing on the other three magnet feed materials. And it so happens that we are very well distributed or our distribution is very good in all of the 4 magnet feed materials. And let me also point out that ultimately dysprosium is just less important to anyone's economics at this point in time. So the 3 magnet feeds that are arguably more important are terbium, which is heavy, and then the 2 lights, neodymium and praseodymium. And the values for those 3 are higher than when we used them in our PEA in 2012. Now, we were also, or I should say SGS was conservative in the prices used in 2012. And let me just point out that the price that we used in our PEA, or SGS used, was $600 a kilo, whereas dysprosium oxide today is about $285 a kilo. Whereas other companies use significantly higher values of dysprosium in the years following us. But at any rate, I am very excited about the continued optimizations of the Ashram project since we released the economics, the positive economics in 2012. And at this point in time, I think it would make sense to turn it over to project manager Darren Smith and for him to give you some insight on the specifics of these potentially what seem to be incremental optimizations of our process flow sheet, but which in actual fact are extremely significant, also because they're based upon what was positive economics back in 2012. So without further ado, thank you very much for all being here. I am going to stay on, of course, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions you might have. And welcome again, and let me turn it over to Darren Smith. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris and Dave. Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you guys are located. I haven't met many of you, so it's a pleasure to have some face-to-face with some of you. So just to follow up on Chris's introduction there, I want to highlight a few slides on the recent work of the academic and some of the institutional collaborations that we've completed, and basically why this is important and why this is quite valuable to commerce, this work, and the contributions that have very much answering questions. And of course, after this, don't hesitate to send me an email or any sort of contact like that. It's I always enjoy it. So I'll just share my screen here and hopefully everything goes well. Can you see that, Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so basically in terms of academic and institutional collaborations, the main highlight and takeaway here is that these institutions want to work with us. Essentially, the vast majority of these have been them talking to commerce and requesting our input and see if we can supply material and then work with that material and so on and come out with mutual benefit from this. And so we've had a large amount of collaborations we've been doing for 4 or 5 years now. And there's definitely been a large uptick just in the last 6-12 months in terms of requests that we're getting and basically the type of work that's been done. And there's been a large value of this work to commerce. So, you know, some of the attributes that people are well aware of is commerce is a carbonatite. 80% of rare earth production is from carbonatites. The remaining is essentially ionic clays with a very minimal amount from a loperite mine in Russia, as well as mineral sands. And essentially that's the same historically. It was dominated by mineral sands in the 50s and then basically went to carbonatites, and that's been dominant since the 50s, and that isn't going to change. And there's fundamental reasons for that, and these are fundamentals that Ashram shares with these historic producers, and that is simple mineralogy, simple gang mineralogy. So and by simple mineralogy, I mean there's 150 minerals that hold rare earths in their structure, but only 3 of those are really dominate commercial production and essentially have been the commercial production since the 50s and before that, since rare earths started being produced. And there's a reason for that. It's because the conventional methods work to process these materials. Optimizations can be done based on certain deposits, but at the end of the day, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to spend copious amounts on R&D because you already have a very strong technical background to work with for these minerals. And of course, that's monazite and bastnäsite. So Ashram is large, that surface, it's monazite bastnäsite, and we'll talk a bit later about the Fluorspar component as well, which is something that is very beneficial to the overall project and it is complementary is the word I'm looking for to the rare earth component. So Commerce essentially has high quality material, and this fundamentally is why we get a lot of requests in the past and still are as recently as last week for material, because this is material that is very similar to global producers and has a very strong chance of going to production. And when you're in university, when you're working on these things, when you're an academic or other type of institutional, you want to work on material that you feel has a chance to actually contribute to a production scenario in the future. So some of these are McGill University. So it's a very good work by Caitlin Bellin and Anthony Willie Jones that are an expert in rare earths and very well known out of Montreal. And they're working on deposit genesis and why we have this heavy rare earth component in Ashram. And this is one aspect that sets us apart from producers. And we have a very strong heavy component. We are a light rare earth deposit, and we've said from the very beginning for the last 10, 12 years, it is going to be a light rare earth deposit that survives in the world and is more fundamentally sound for long-term sustainable production and success, economic success in the industry. And we have this heavy rare earth component, and this is from xenotime. You don't often find xenotime in carbonatites. It is typically bastnäsite and monazite. So we have xenotime, which is a good kicker, a good spice, I like to call it, to our value of our rare earths. And so Caitlin's work is dealing with outlining that, how that came to be there. And it's given us some good exploration ideas of where to go to find more. So that's been very beneficial. The recent work on the tailings characterization by Sophie Costas, this is some news we put out recently. This is fundamentally very important. This is work that we have to do regardless. And we absolutely want to do it. And it's important to demonstrate that our tailings are essentially benign. The flotation tailing up north, they're below the high risk nature, and under the directives are not considered radioactive under the Quebec Environmental Quality Act and the Hazardous Materials Act. So these are very important components that we want to, because at the end of the day, there's nothing inherently polluting about rare earths. It is about properly managing it, and you can do this with good science and the technology that exists today. And so this work helps build that foundation to ensure it is done properly. University of Laval helps with beneficiation, hydrometallurgy. They had a breakthrough that helped us improve recoveries in the cleaner concentrates that we were doing flotation. So this is a benefit to commerce as well as helping the academic world. And they're looking at types of modeling that can be used to reduce costs and piloting, for example. University of Windsor's Patrick Schmidt. So this is work that is on the overall carbonatite as a whole, to how it came to be, why the rare earths are there, and this gives us additional exploration vectors, for niobium, tantalum, these sorts of things. But again, for the rare earths, how it's there helps us mine it better, more efficiently, properly. And of course, CanMet Mining. So CanMet Mining is a division of Natural Resources Canada. So this is federal funding. And this was about $16 or $18 million over about 6 years to the Canadian rare earth element industry to basically develop that industry. And they're very sharp people, and they've done some excellent work. And they've been able to recently, some of the news that we put out, they've reduced reagent consumptions. And this is very important. The mine will be up north. It is where Mother Nature puts it. And basically, we want to be able to reduce, what we have to transport. This helps reduce impacts all over the place, number of ships, number of people required, perhaps, or more importantly, more efficient operation, less reagents required. So that's been very important. And the company is currently exploring opportunities with a lot of other groups that have approached us. Corp, an expert mineral processing group located in Quebec, UCAT, located in Quebec as well, and CTRI handle residual materials and so on, a very good group. And of course, we're looking at additional mandates with the University of Laval, because we're quite happy with that work, and the INRS as well, continuing that tailings work that Sophie's done, but also expanding that onto some other water recycling and these sorts of things as well. So these are very important aspects that need to get done through to production, and it helps us show transparency and helping the overall industry by us doing this as well, and we get tangible benefits from these. Okay, just go to the next slide here. Okay, and just to follow up on this, I just wanted to comment on an inquiry we got this week, and basically the U.S. Department of Energy issued a funding announcement to address gaps in the supply chain, and Chris noted on this, and basically they approached Natural Resources Canada that basically approached us in terms of, Ashram would be a good fit for this funding for this work. And so basically this is where we sort of fit in. And basically the takeaway here is that under this Defense Production Sharing Agreement from 1956, Canada's supply is considered domestic in the eyes of the U.S. government. And this is important to note because we hear a lot of chatter. There's a lot of the Joint Action Plan. I was at a workshop with the EU Commission and the Canadian government as well. And there's the same underlying tone to all of this, that there is a need for a security of supply, a stable supply, and a diversity of supply. And this becomes, is more so emphasized in recent, the last 2 years from the China tensions with the U.S. Because China, of course, dominates production. But also COVID, and as unfortunate as COVID is, absolutely, it is highlighting that these supply chains can be fragile at times when it's dominated by one source. And so there is a lot of work being done, and there's a lot of things being announced. There's been recent legislation introduced in the U.S. to basically bring over supply, bring back separation, bring back metal making, and moreover, it all starts with production and production that stays on the North American continent. And Ashram is well positioned and essentially has all the fundamentals that are required to do this. And so this is part of the reason we're getting this interest, and we've had this interest for quite some time. Now I'd like to move to Hazen Research, and we've had various groups work on a material. Gerhard Merker, brilliant metallurgist, for example, has helped as well. But the primary lead lab has been Hazen Research. Crystal and Nick Hazen, they're very sharp, and they have a lot of experience. They worked on they're based in Colorado, USA, and they worked on the original Molycorp pilot plant, and they basically have extensive experience in rare metals and extensive experience in rare earths specifically. And I've always been impressed by the attention, by the ideas, by the flow, and by the work and the results. And basically, Ashram, we didn't take how do I say this? We didn't take the approach of saying we're going to produce separated oxides and just, throwing a couple $100,000 on it and coming up with kilos separated oxide and say, here you go, we can do it. In my opinion, that only serves so many purposes, and it doesn't serve the purposes that I want, that I believe, commerce needs and wants. And that need is to practically develop a flow sheet that is going to be practical and for production. And when you look at all current and past producers, all those carbonatites, they all produce at least 40% rare earth mineral concentrate to do it. Bayan-Obo, well over 40. Linus produces a 40. Mountain Pass produces upwards of 55, 60+%. These are carbonatites. These have monazite, bastnasite mineralogies. Ashram is the same thing. If you cannot produce a high-grade mineral concentrate, you are going to be handcuffing yourself. You're going to be, when you put your material into solution, if you're not reducing your mass to a high-grade mineral concentrate there, you're going to be putting a lot more deleterious elements that you don't want into solution that you have to deal with, precipitate out. It's going to hurt your rare earth recoveries. You're going to have a much larger reagent consumption because I'm basically digesting a mountain as opposed to a bucket. And it's a lot cheaper to digest a concentrated bucket of rare earths than it is a mountain of dilute rare earths. You want to create a mineral concentrate. And so, this partially got lost in the noise and overshadowed perhaps by other companies 10 years ago. But at the end of the day, it was quite evident to us that Ashram has these minerals, and that means it can make these high-grade concentrates. And that's the goal, nothing short. And so that is what we did, and that is where we put our money. And this, to me, was the absolute right thing to do and a brilliant move. And basically now we've been able to produce mineral concentrates well exceeding 40%, and well exceeding the recoveries in the PEA. So we've been able to produce mineral concentrates, 42% REO at 76% recovery. We've been able to produce mineral concentrates between 45 and a couple over 50%, a slightly lower recovery. But at the end of the day, we can produce well over 40% REO mineral concentrate at well over 70% recovery. And if we compare this to the PEA is 10% mineral concentrate is what we used at a 70% recovery. So we're right away changed from the PEA. We've quadrupled our mineral concentrate grade. This means that we're going to have a much smaller volume of deleterious elements in solution to a much smaller volume to digest. We're going to have a much smaller hydrometallurgical facility. And when you look at rare earth projects, when you read them all, the largest cost is the hydromet facility. And so if you put the focus on the front end, you can reduce that cost, you can reduce that technical risk, you can make yourself much better positioned to move forward, because at the end of the day, you have to be cost competitive with China or just go home. And you need to be able to do that. And this is fundamentally how you do it, by focusing on the front end. And if you don't have those minerals, you're handcuffing yourself, because some minerals you might only be able to theoretically get a 5% mineral concentrate. That's not going to do it. So that was a long spiel on that, but basically Hazen has developed our flow sheet. We've piloted greater than 5 tons of this material. We've made a good grade concentrate. We've carried out the leaching circuit, which basically removes the remaining carbonate, and we've developed the magnetic component that basically allows us to get this high grade concentrate. And the other aspect I'd like to point out here is that the fluorspar that we recover it was in the PEA. We had a fluorine resource, basically a fluorspar resource, but there were no economics of that included in the PEA. The fluorspar is purely new. That is something that we wanted to make sure we developed properly. We wanted to make sure it would not complicate the flow sheet and add undue technical risk. And I could cite examples of where this has happened before, and companies have had to backtrack and realize that at the end of the day, rare earths have to drive your economics. And if you want to get out byproducts, that's great, but you need to do it as effectively as possible without complicating or compromising the recovery of your rare earths. And so this is something that we focused on, and we didn't really talk about the fluorspar too much until we were confident that we could do that and not compromise our rare earth recovery flow sheet. So basically we've developed 2 parts where we can get the fluorspar: the front end, which is just a bolt-on pre-flotation that gives us that concentrate, and then the back end, where we recover the rest of the fluorite, the vast majority of it, over 80% combined, is a tailing stream of our primary rare earth concentrate. So that tailings that normally would go into a tailings management facility has value and a saleable value with minimal extra processing work on it. And so basically this means we have a smaller tailings facility. This is lower cost. This is lower OPEX and CAPEX. And not only that, we get money for the stuff that we sell. So our fluorspar does not complicate our rare earth flow sheet, has no negative impact on our rare earth recoveries. The front end, the impact is less than 0.5%. Right now is looking at 0.3% perhaps, and that could potentially be recovered as well. So there's effectively no impact on your rare earth recoveries, and you obtain this high grade, high value product of acid spar. And so the next steps now is developing that is basically impurity removal of that acid spar. We've hit the 97%. We're now looking at impurity removal to basically get that official spec that's highly valuable. And then of course comprehensive reporting on the piloting and recent work. Things need to be reported on. And of course additional piloting and production of requested samples by third parties. We've had probably 24 requests at least for various samples from third parties. Some lanthanum oxide, serum carbonate, NdPr, obviously oxide, mixed rare earth carbonate, lots of things. And we haven't officially set what we're going to produce, because that is a pretty key decision. And you don't want to necessarily go all the way downstream, but our approach is a modular approach where basically you produce the base saleable product in the world, and that's essentially a mixed rare earth carbonate. So there's your lowest OPEX, first saleable product, and get into production, get that cash flow. and then keep your technical risk to a minimum so you can do that, do it profitably, and then basically make sure you've designed it to be modular. You can add on another section to now go into partial separations where, you know, Linus has, I think, a very good sort of a setup where they have, they make the lanthanum product, cerium product, and NdPr product, and then the rest is a mixed and heavy concentrate that they sell. And so the primary area you make your money is going to be that NdPr. And they do, and therefore they get that extra value add by that partial separation. So that is sort of a modular approach that we're looking at, and there'll be trade-offs done to make sure that this is the most practical, cost-effective, reasonable risk way for your maximum sort of payoff at your least amount of OPEX and practical CAPEX and so on. So that's some comments on the metallurgy. And just the last slide, I just wanted to highlight that Commerce is has the right focus in terms of we want to do things properly and correctly, and you know, we were recognized in 2015 with the E3+, and that's great to be recognized. But at the end of the day, the recognition is also relevant because we're doing what we want to do and how we feel we should do it, and this is important. There's a general lack of understanding in the world about the production of REEs. As I mentioned before, REEs are not inherently polluting when they're produced, but in China, in the past, they mine them with more disregard for the environment, and China's improved these practices over time, and their costs are going up because of that. And this is something that will not and could not occur in the Western world. In Canada, for example, you need to put 100% up of your reclamation up front, for example, and there's lots of steps that you have to go through and make sure you do things properly. So, you know, rare earths are, you know, a point I like to make is rare earth deposits are small footprint. So if you look at, you know, a gold deposit, or let's say an iron ore deposit, you might mine 50,000 tons a day of iron ore, have huge tailings from that, and you know, they'll have a red, you know, look red tint because of the oxidation and so on. Well, if we contrast that to rare earths, and this goes for, you know, essentially most of the rare companies out there, is that they're small footprints. We're looking at maybe 1 to 4 or 5,000 tons a day max at the upper end, you know, and 4,000 tons a day for us gives us, you know, more than 10% of the global market. So it's not a there's small footprints. These are small mines, but high value. So you have a very high value in a small volume. So you're not going to have a large tailings. You're not going to have a huge pit. You're not going to have a lot of as much disturbance, if you will. And so this is important when you're comparing rare earth projects to other projects. There's existing technology and technical framework out there to ensure things are developed properly. And you know, Commerce also has a strong relationship with the Inuit that, you know, we have a formal LOI, which helps us, you know, for 10, 12 years, we've been meeting with them quite often, and to have a formal relationship, it's good because now we're all meeting at the same time regularly. This is very beneficial for us. And you know, maybe it's a cliche statement, but I personally just don't want them to accept the project. I want to make sure they want the project. It's a partnership in development, if you will, and how can we make this project maximize the benefit to the company, but also maximize the benefit to the community. And this is a lot of back and forth and requires good communication. And I think we're quite fortunate to be as transparent as we are and develop those relationships as best practical and have this formal LOI in place to be a step forward in the right direction. So I'm quite confident with where Commerce is and where it's going. I'm very happy with how the metallurgy's gone and where we sit. And I think there's been a lot of de-risking that's been done since the PEA. And this will all come together and culminate in the PFS when that is completed. And so I think we've set the right foundation to move forward and really help this project on its way to production. So yeah, thank you very much. Look forward to any questions anyone has.
Yes, pardon me. That's me just above you there, RBG.
Darren, can you unshare your screen?
Yeah.
There we go. We can see people now.
Thank you very much, Darren. I appreciated that.
How about the power source? What are you doing for power source for all this, and where is it?
So the power source up north is, we're looking at essentially 2 or 3 components. The primary base load up north would be diesel. So all the northern communities operate off diesel as well. And there's a Hydro-Quebec plant in Cujuac that converts that to electricity. For us, we'd have a local diesel plant, which is very common for projects in these regions. And we would look to supplement that with a potentially 3 megawatt windmill. And this is something that we're looking at more seriously because it's been demonstrated at Raglan, it's been demonstrated at Diavik. These are our mines up in the north. Raglan particularly is relatively close to us, and it's gone so well that I believe they're installing another one. And so there's also other technologies that are coming out that we're very interested in such as basically short-term battery storage technologies where you collect some of this wasted energy off the diesel engines and cycles it back, these sort of technologies. And so we're definitely looking at ways to make this a green project that helps move it forward. And there's lots of support for this through the government. Part of that wind turbine initiative was funded through a grant from the government, for example. And that's just for the mining operations. So we're looking to do a flotation concentrate on site. Then we would ship that out, and it would go on a boat, which is essentially the cheapest shipping on the planet. And it will go down south to a location we're looking at on the St. Lawrence. And once we're there, we're hooked up to the grid. So for hydro, we're right on a railhead. So it's very cheap access to reagents and power, natural gas, for example, to create a flame for heat. And basically that is where the majority of the processing will be completed. The leach, the magnetic separation, all the hydromet work will be down south where we're hooked up to the Quebec grid, which has very low rates, I believe like 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour, so some of the lowest in North America. And it's why we have several aluminum smelters operating right in that region on the St. Lawrence, because of the extremely low cost of electricity. Because essentially Quebec is heated, everything is powered from the dams that are up north. And my whole my hydro bill at my house here in Quebec City might be like $40 this month. So it's very cheap electricity here.
Are you looking at in any way at this new technology for small nuclear power plants?
I've heard of it. I've actually worked in the uranium industry in the past. I don't think that technology is developed sufficiently to my knowledge. And for a junior, we want to, de-risking is very important. And so it helps a lot when you have a major that can afford to work out the kinks and has a cash flow to do that, to de-risk it for you. So if these technologies are out there, we'll for sure look at them and see how they can be adapted and perhaps reduce our risk and our CapEx or OpEx. But if it is demonstrated by a major, then it becomes far more serious of something to look at integrating. And I'm not quite sure of how far those are developed, but I don't think I think it's still in development, the tech.
I have a question for you, Darren, and that's about, and we know we made a presentation to Hazen to do some work, and that was through the US government. And they submitted to move our stuff along a little bit further, and that was rejected. So I was curious to know maybe what the criteria were, and do you think things have changed in the terms of what's happening now, in the terms of the US government moving it forward?
Chris, you might be better to comment on that one. Chris is more up to date with the actions in the US. There's obviously been a lot of movement happening, and there's been a lot of funding initiatives out there. But in terms of those specifics, I'll let Chris comment further.
Essentially, a year ago, well, 13 months ago, China made what, in hindsight, was the hollow threat of halting shipments of rare earth elements to the United States, let's say weaponizing rare earth elements. That didn't happen, but that did create a flurry in the market for us and everybody else that had a rare earth element project, and it did create an increased amount of anxiety in the United States. And so yes, the Defense Logistics Agency did put forward a couple of programs, and there was apparently capital available. And I have to tell you, because it was Justin and myself and Darren and Hazen who worked on these proposals, they're incredibly demanding. Now, it is the Defense Logistics Agency. And so one of the aspects of it is specifically how field ready the process is. And so part of it is that the Department of Defense is different from the Department of Energy, as it has been explained to us by our American associates. The DOE finances essentially new technology or new processes or new developments of processes. The DoD finances projects or processes that are closer to being battle ready, field ready. Now, having said that, we applied for both of our projects, and I think in terms of what we were looking capital for to essentially complete the pilot plant operation at Hazen, I would suggest that maybe we weren't close enough to commercial production, so we didn't get those grants. However, I don't think anybody got those grants. And so that's the other interesting thing. But that was very much the state of mind in 2019. So yes, to answer the other part of your question, yes, the level of anxiety, as I said in my preamble, has never been higher. And so for the Americans right now, I believe there is more activity going on in terms of actually realizing and fostering the development of a domestic source of rare earth elements and a rare earth element industry in North America. So, you know, we've been in touch with W.R. Grace, Albemarle, et cetera, and those are the two American companies that are probably the biggest buyers of Chinese rare earth elements right now in the United States. But they buy the low value light rare earth elements, which we're certainly looking to produce, no question about that. And they would be great customers or partners with us. But the current state of anxiety right now is at the highest DEFCON level it has ever basically been. And so everybody on planet Earth, and the Americans especially, are looking to reduce or eliminate their current total dependency on China. And that's the way it is. Mountain Pass is owned 9.9% by a Chinese company, and that's arguably why the Pentagon rescinded on their investment into Mountain Pass Materials. Mountain Pass Materials produces approximately 27,000 tons of rare earth element concentrate per annum. It's basically all lights. But that still has to go back to China for processing. Now, in terms of this situation, I might as well just segue and say that the company, I think, that has the best business plan and will be the most efficient and the cheapest to become a rare earth element processor for the US market is Energy Fuels. And at the end of the day, their current solvent extraction facility in Utah that has historically, or for the last 10 years, been a service provider in processing out the radioactive elements for other companies when they find radioactive elements in their feedstock, they can potentially transition their operation over to process rare earth elements very efficiently, very cheaply, arguably. And so I'm very interested in the conversations we've had with them, and I'm very interested in their progress towards becoming what the United States doesn't have right now, what North America doesn't have right now, which is an actual processor that would be a customer for what we're looking to process. Having said that, you know, the first requests for samples came to us from the world's largest processor that is not a Chinese company, which is Solvay Rhodia. And Darren and I were touring the site at La Rochelle on September 15th, 2014, the day I became president. And they were the first ones to essentially understand, the first industry player to understand what we were potentially going to take to market. And they were very quick to request a sample from us. An interesting difference, and I know I've gone on a long time, is that at that time, in September of 2014, they said to us, yeah, we want a mixed rare earth carbonate, but don't send us the cerium and don't send us the lanthanum. Yeah, we've got too much of that already coming in from Linus, et cetera, et cetera. Now, a year later, that was following the bankruptcy of Molycorp. And what is Molycorp? Mountain Pass, they're a producer of cerium and lanthanum. And so that was a significant change to the global production of cerium and lanthanum. And so a year later, in November of 2015, the main metallurgist at Solvay, Dr. Alain Rolat, said to me in Singapore, he says, oh, by the way, we want the cerium and the lanthanum now. Now, having said that, in 2018, China became a net importer of rare earth elements. And so, as I said in my preamble, there's been some very important sea changes in terms of the rare earth element market, the macros of the rare earth element market, but the fundamentals haven't changed. There has been essentially no one who doesn't have a deposit with the simple fundamentals that we have that have had success. And so, you know, there are so many times when we think of, and Justin loves to talk about, the space pen. You know, ultimately at the end of the day, the DOE has put money into trying to process rare earth elements out of coal and coal dust. The levels of rare earth elements in your average coal deposit, 200 parts per million. What are ours? Approximately 20,000 parts per million. So the comparison of the economics to extract economically 200 parts per million as opposed to 20,000, think about it for a second. It hasn't worked so far as yet. So at any rate, again, the anxiety level is the highest I believe it has ever been. And so, yes, I think we will also benefit from that.
And if I could add to that, there's been a lot of work over the years put into new uses for cerium and lanthanum, because as you produce NdPr, you're going to overproduce and produce more cerium and lanthanum. And obviously there's a large market in the US for fuel cracking catalysts, as Chris alluded to, and so on. But there's also new uses like cerium alloys that are in high performance engine blocks, for example, or cerium coated paints, for example, that can go on planes. And basically, you know, that annoyance when you sit there for half hour in the winter and they de-ice the plane, well, it would prevent that ice from building up, for example. So these are real life technologies that are being developed. And, you know, another one I like is how much waste do you have when you go to McDonald's and you squeeze the ketchup out of the packets? There's so much ketchup left in there. Or when you do a shampoo bottle and try to empty it out, there's always stuff left. And you can coat that with cerium and cerium sort of product inside they're developing, and it'll allow all the material to flow out. So they're actively looking for new ways and new uses for cerium and lanthanum. Well, on the flip side, they're looking to actively engineer out terbium and dysprosium. And so this is why I think Commerce is perfectly positioned. We are an NdPr deposit, and we've said that for a decade, but we have some of those spice elements, terbium, dysprosium, because they're still required, and so they still have value, and we have access to that value. But this cerium and lanthanum that we're going to produce, you're going to be able to sell it, and there's new uses that are coming up. It might take some time to sell it. You're not going to sell it maybe every week or something, every month, but there's going to be a market in the US. They're going to want to buy that stuff over the stuff from overseas. There's going to be incentives from the US to purchase that material, and so there's going to be options for us to get value from that. And the new uses that are being developed to only benefit light rare earth deposits that, of course, are anchored in that NdPr, which is where the value is for any rare earth deposit out there right now. It's NdPr. I want to be a deposit that my main commodity is not trying to be engineered out by every engineer on the planet. I want to be anchored on something that is very solid NdPr content that is going to be fundamental and anchor your economics for decades.
And let me just say as well, at the end of the day, to be really clear, the markets for cerium and lanthanum are huge. These are huge markets. Yeah. So everybody that drives a Ford 350 dually, when they go to the gas pumps, they're depending upon the Chinese to have supplied the American market with lanthanum so that the oil produced in the United States or Alberta or wherever else can be processed into gasoline. And second, that F-350 in every vehicle with an internal combustion engine is required to have a catalytic converter. And how do you make a catalytic converter? Well, you need cerium. So at the end of the day, W.R. Grace and Albemarle, they're huge buyers, and ultimately the pain for the American consumer would be felt immediately at the gas pumps or in the purchase of a vehicle if the Chinese did follow through with halting shipments of rare earth elements to the United States. And I have to say, that is one of the points I focus on truly less than some of our Chinese associates. And I'm talking Chinese Canadian, Chinese American associates who have expressed their belief that that it's more than likely that China will halt shipments to the United States. And this may be a strange connection for you, but house prices in Vancouver doubling in a couple of years, what does it have to do with rare earth elements? Doesn't really have anything to do, except that they both have to do with the Chinese government. So the last time Darren and I were in Beijing was in November 2012, a week before President Xi Jinping was made president. And the thing is that the number of Chinese from mainland China that moved to Canada after that point, basically because they were worried about their own government. And so this has continued, and this has given us some amount of insight, more than we got when we were in China working and meeting most of the big six, by the way, because of this concern of Xi Jinping. And really, over the last 8 years, he's just increased his grip on power. And this has brought us to where we are right now. And again, the rest of the world being more anxious than it's ever been about an alternate supply.
If I could just interrupt this question and answer period for a couple of announcements. One is, Justin, could you introduce yourself and give us your Skype address and encourage people to Skype you if they have questions that don't get answered today?
Yes, by all means. As always, you can reach me on my Skype, which is jschrun on Skype. Obviously, it'll be at the, we'll send you all an email, and it will be on the bottom of that. We have embraced the new way, and we have a variety of ways that you can get a hold of us. It'll be Skype, Zoom, what have you. One, you know, out of difficult times, often good growth can happen, and this COVID situation forced all of us within the broader Zimtu group to develop a very, very successful and efficient online communication platform that we have never stopped perfecting. There's always kinks to be worked out, but this is the future. While I have the floor here, if I may, we have had several questions that have been mailed in. Greg Klein from the NIMO has a few that are very on topic. He's asked, Darren, if we have an approximate date for the Ashram's next resource update. Will that resource include the Fluorspar? And obviously, we've already tackled the one question, but when do we expect to potentially be in a position to start shipping samples to possible customers?
The resource is essentially the drilling is complete. It's really down to geological modeling and then basically the mineral resource estimate. So typically this is completed near the end of the PFS. The PFS with funding take anywhere between 8 to 12 months to complete, depending. There's ways to shave off time on that. So the mineral resource estimate would likely be, we could either put it out before that in the middle somewhere, or basically at the time the PFS is put out would be the mineral estimate, and then of course the ore reserve that comes out with a PFS. But the bulk of the work is done. It's really on perfecting the geological model, because that is where this is going to give you the accuracy for your mineral resource estimate to make sure you have a proper geological model and get your domaining correct and so on. Yes, it will include Fluorspar, absolutely. It may include a couple other elements as well, but for right now, it'll be the rare earths and it'll be Fluorspar. It was determined as fluorine, and the PEA will be looking to make that more specific towards Fluorspar based on the mineralogy that we've done. We know that it's essentially all from Fluorspar. And basically Ashram, as the resource is right now, it's essentially, I believe, this the world's second largest Fluorspar deposit. The world's largest Fluorspar deposit is Bainobo, which also happens to be the world's largest rare earth deposit. So there's a lot of similarities there, but Fluorspar is definitely something that will be included. And I think samples to potential customers. So that's something that is targeted to be completed before the PFS is put out. That's a matter of taking the flotation concentrate that we've produced and the leach residue that we produce, and basically pushing that further downstream. And so basically we have a lot of requests of various end products. So basically we're in the stage of sorting out of basically how much feed and what we have to do to make sure we get the proper quantities for the parties that are requesting them. And so yeah, it's, you know, subject to funding is sort of the time frame that can be done in, but it can be done relatively quick.
Maybe at this time I could take a moment to introduce Axel Hoppe. He's the chairman of the board, and unfortunately at the beginning of the meeting when I said nice things about him, he was having technical difficulties, so he didn't hear them. And I'm not typically the guy that says nice things all the time, so it's too bad he missed them. But Axel, maybe you could say hello.
I would like to say hello, and I have to apologize. It's my first time on Zoom, and well, I'm an old man and difficult to handle the whole thing, and I didn't get it quite. But anyway, I'm listening, and well, let's wait and see where we can go from here. Sorry that I didn't make it to the initial opening, but that was simply my fault.
Anyway, Axel's a very important part of the commerce team in that, you know, he was formerly CEO at H.C. Stark, so he has huge depth of knowledge in the whole processing and in the marketing of material, and is always there for the rest of the commerce team to get advice from, and that's certainly been very helpful over the time. If we do we have other questions?
I have a quick question. My name is Jack. I have a question for Darren and for Chris. Once the production is going, based on the initial materials that the company plans to produce, where will these products go primarily in terms of industry? And will it be essentially North America, or other countries will be also candidates?
I'm happy to answer. Nice to see you, Jack. Essentially, you know, that is to be determined, but the facility that we are looking to construct along the St. Lawrence in Quebec would be on the grid, partly because of then ease of transport of what we produce onto the North American rail network. Second, it's on the St. Lawrence, so yes, of course, it could be put back onto, the concentrate could be put on a boat, and within, what, a couple of days, it would be at La Rochelle. Or it could be at any of the other processors that have requested sample from us. And this is the base commercial product we are looking to produce. And this is also the same sample material that we will be able to produce, have produced, and will produce and send out to those interested parties. So on that list, there would be Less Common Metals in the United Kingdom, there would be Retech in Norway, there would be Solvay on the west coast of France, and then there would be all of the potential processors in the United States. You know, I would suggest again that Energy Fuels would be a great opportunity for us and for the American market. Behind them would also be other opportunities with companies that are working on new processing technologies. So there's K-Tech in Florida, there's IBC in Utah as well, there's Rare Earth Salts in Nebraska, there's IMC in Mississauga, and all of those have requested a sample from us as well. And so ultimately, to answer your question, this will be determined by which company feels like they need to partner with us.
But, pardon me, but you still have not addressed the issue of getting it out of the ground then to where you're talking about on the St. Lawrence or anywhere else.
Oh, so you're talking about the road?
Well, whether it's road, rail, air, or boat, you know, you got to get
road.
it from source to point.
Yeah. So in terms of that, and Darren may like to add this, flesh this out a bit, but it's road. The road's the only thing that makes sense. And ultimately, in terms of the road, as we did in the original economics in the PEA, we absorbed all of the cost of the road, and the project still had the incredible economics it did have then. And arguably, we've improved those economics since that time over the last 8 years. So the road is really only the way to go to get the material to a facility and then to ship it out the 4 months out of the year when the sea lanes are open. Very similar to the situation with Raglan, Glencore's Raglan, which is like 500 miles to the north. They produce 12 months a year. They transport their material about 168 kilometers on a road that was financed by the Quebec government in 1997. They stockpile it for 8 months out of the year. And then for 4 months out of the year, they send out ships that hold about 30,000 tons out from that facility on the coast of Ungava Bay and down to wherever they're selling or processing it. It would be the same for us. The airships, again, in terms of, you know, small scale nuclear power, airships, nuclear power, I don't think we're there yet with those techniques. Darren may want to answer specifically about the road as well, our ability to use an ice road to begin with, etc.
Yeah, I'll quickly share.
Is there a schedule for getting started and finished?
Yes, that schedule is called money.
Exactly.
Darren, we discussed this yesterday. Maybe you could flesh that out a bit. How things would start from multiple stages, using the ice road, etc., etc. But I think there's quite a bit of interest in this, obviously.
Yeah, I'll just quickly share my screen here. So this is sort of a picture of the road. So as Chris highlighted, it's been optimized a lot with the PFS in terms of it's been looked at with Fortunex, a very good engineering group, and they've reduced the cost. The estimates is projected to be, you know, at least 50 million lower. Smaller crossings, only 3. The geology goes straight with it, so you're kind of it's 75% of it is classified as an easy build by the engineering group. So technically, it's easy infrastructure to build. And basically, we've looked at all the options. We've looked at airplanes. We've looked at going south. We've looked at pipelines. We've looked at airships. It's a technology that's being developed, but it's not demonstrated yet. They're not approved for flight yet. There's regulations that have to be developed. So, and for example, that, you know, the ones that are prototypes carry, you know, 20 tons or so, and you know, we're looking to ship out a 250,000 tons a year, for example. So the volume isn't there yet, and the costs haven't been determined and how operable they are in the northern environment. That doesn't mean they're not something that could be worked into a project, and it doesn't mean that there's no value there in some aspects. But for this project, it doesn't make a lot of sense from those perspectives. In terms of the road, so this project, it's in the north. There's mines operating in the area. There's 2 of them up there. It could start with a winter road. So you put in a winter road first, and it's potentially you could start some production and utilize this winter road as the main road gets built. It'll take a couple of years to build the road, depending on schedules, how much equipment that you put in there. For example, if you bring things up on the sea lift goes throughout the summer and fall. So you want to make sure you hit the sea lift, or you push back a year, for example. So there's ways to shorten that time frame. The road's in a good location in terms of the north, because it is it doesn't impact the caribou, if you will. There's no calving grounds that it crosses. It's well in between 2 herds, so we don't have any of those sorts of issues. There's no endangered species that have been found. The environmental work that's been done has all been positive. There's been mammal surveys done, so it's been de-risked to a high level, I would say. Fortunex has stated that as well. It's been done to a level that's sort of beyond the requirement, if you will, for PFS. But it is critical for long-term production, because at the end of the day, you need to have a low OPEX, and the low OPEX is going to be this road that's direct. And you can see how it basically goes north-south. It doesn't have to wind all over the place to get there. The purple route was the PEA, and you can see we straightened it out for the PFS, and it's a more efficient, cost-effective route. And so at the end of the day, the road is something that helps the long-term viability of the project, brings the OpEx down, but you can, we're looking at ways to augment at the beginning with a winter road to start, for example, but the winter road will be part of the construction process of it. So it's something that it's part of the project, and the CapEx, as Chris noted, was included in the PEA, and it will be included in the PFS. We've had good dialogue with the government. We've had recent dialogue with Natural Resources Canada on it, and looking at ways that could help develop the north. There's a strong interest from the provincial government to develop infrastructure, and the way that they push infrastructure in these regions is to joint with industry. They want industry to help be a driving force to it, and they'll support that. And we can see this with the Stornoway Road for the diamonds to the south. This was financed with the low interest loan by the backstop by the government. And so we're in active, constant dialogue with the government on this. We're actually, one of those research projects that I alluded to earlier is actually looking at the road in more detail to help more transparent and flesh out some of this information. And the last thing I point out is we've signed an LOI with half a dozen or more companies operating in the region. And basically these companies in the region have basically stated that they're interested in paying a portion of the maintenance of this road based on its use. So this road would reduce the all the exploration in the trough, all the development of future projects. So there is a heated interest, and it's in the best interest of regional players for this infrastructure to be advanced and to be developed. And I just flipped to another slide here that we presented to the Quebec government a while back, and you can see some of the projects here. Some of these have changed. There's more in some areas now, and so on. But you can see that the road would help a lot of these projects, and this is why they've signed on as well, because this road will not just be a driveway to our deposit. It will open up the trough and be used by the community, by the and by other companies out there. And of course, this all helps offset, reduce our costs, and help with additional funding mechanisms for it. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else got a question?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, Chris. Hi, Justin. Hi, Mike. It's Bob Raffel from Montreal.
Good to see you.
Can you? Yes, it's a pleasure to see you, actually. I hope you're all well. Can you talk a little bit about the minister in Quebec City, what his attitude is towards the road? And like, is he willing to put up 1 million or 10 million or 100 million? I mean, he's got some other financial pressures right now, but.
Well, I'm happy to say I believe there is a representative from the Société de Planeur on this Zoom call. In terms of the conversation that Darren and I had with the principals from NRCan a couple of months ago, they asked us essentially what more could the Canadian government do to help us advance the project, and we did mention the road. And ultimately, as Darren pointed out, there are many companies in the area. I think it's more like 8 or 9 that have projects in various stages of activity right now that would also use the road. And of course, right next to us, of course, is the niobium claims group and that is a fabulous opportunity. So we're not talking about a single driveway for one company. We're talking about a road that would essentially open up the entire area. In terms of that, yes, I do believe the Quebec government and the Canadian government have a lot of other fish to fry, maybe not bigger, but certainly on that phone call a couple of months ago with NRCan, we discussed the road to resources that the Canadian government financed, the road to Tuktoyaktuk. And ultimately, this road is much shorter, is much less expensive. And then back to the Quebec government, Darren and I met with our most recent meeting with the Société de Planar in person was in November at Quebec Mines, and that was very positive. And so I believe very clearly there is still interest on both federal and provincial governments in seeing this infrastructure built one way or the other. And we are certainly looking forward to hearing more about that, and we'll certainly communicate that to all investors as it becomes clear to us.
I had I met with the minister at PDAC, and he was meeting with various companies, and their interest was, you know, what can they do to help? Where's the project at? And get very familiar with it. And I was very impressed by the you know, the knowledge and the interest and basically the willing to listen and figure out ways that they could help move that road forward and support that. And so the dialogue's been very positive, and I think there's a lot of interest from a lot of different groups and levels to see infrastructure advance in this region. So.
Certainly one of the other things which Darren kind of reminded me of is the work being done by Brian Coates, the former president of Osisko Gold Royalties. And Brian was chosen by the Quebec Ministry of Natural Resources to be their representative in the meetings back last September with the U.S. government, you know, in the work that ended up producing the Canada-U.S. Joint Action Plan on Critical Minerals, which was news released on January 9th, 2020. Anyways, I keep in good contact with Brian, and Brian was also asked by the Ministry of Natural Resources to write a report on where he believes they should spend the $90 million that was in the recent budget, which was put aside for technology metals projects. And so that's lithium, graphite, cobalt, and rare earth elements. So there is work going on. We don't have clarity on if or when that capital may be deployed, but as I say, we'll certainly keep you posted of that.
Okay, thanks. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Are we done, folks?
Yep.
Oh, hold on. I think I'm just going to unmute this gentleman right here who has waved his hand here. One moment. You should, oh. There we go. Go ahead. Sorry, Danny.
I was just wondering, I see there's river both on the right and on the left of our project. Wouldn't it be possible to use a small barge to go up current and just barge it toward the ocean? If you look at the Ungiva Bay, there's two rivers. Maybe one is wide enough so we could use a small barge. We used it in another project for gold production. That might be a lot less expensive to do this way.
That's a very good. It's a very good question. Yes, what we're looking at is we don't. I mean, it would come out on the road, and then we have to get it onto tidewater, and so we're not looking at, you know, a port like iron ore would need, for example. Large tonnage, as I alluded to before, we're very small tonnage, so not a lot of supplies coming in, not a lot of supplies going out, and concentrate going out. Relatively speaking, it's very high value, small volume. So we, in the PEA, we had looked at a docking facility, which is around 42 million or so. In the PEA, based on the work we've done in the PFS, we believe we can reduce this and reduce the impacts and basically look at a barge facility where basically, you know, this area actually has some of the highest tides in the world. I believe like just the river over has like the second highest tides in the world. And so we can utilize that to actually save a lot of costs and reduce the infrastructure we need to build, because we can use those tides to actively beach and unbeach our barge that we load onto the shore. And so a facility like that is something we're looking at, and we would also look at a ferry facility across. This would help the community as well in terms of they could utilize this infrastructure. So this infrastructure, we're looking at making sure it's expandable at some point if another project gets developed, or if the community wants to make use of it in a certain regard, it can be accommodated and basically be utilized to their benefit. And so, but basically, yeah, barge is definitely something we're looking at, and we think it could be quite applicable from talking with the engineers and the initial work that's been done. So that's something we're very interested in advancing.
But even to move the material from the Ashram deposit to the barge facility, if you go back to the image you had just before, there's a river that's going back down.
Yeah, you're talking about the Kenya-Pekisco River. So we have looked at building a road across and going up that. That river is I would say it's a more sensitive, or it's a sensitive area, and it would be potentially a lot more difficult. Building the road over here, it's a little more difficult to build because you're going across the grain and going around these lakes, and so you'd have some more bridges. So it's something that's been looked at, but it was sort of didn't look very practical at the very beginning, and that discussion, if it was to start again, would start with the Inuit to get their feedback on that. But at this time, I don't see it being a very practical. That flow of that as well has decreased over the years because of the damming further south. And so part of the reason that we have our barge, sorry, I don't have it, like I said, I'm not sharing it right now, but part of the reason we have our barge closer up the shore is because we need to have we want to have deeper water. We need to have deeper water because you want to get a ship in there far enough that you can barge the ship out to, take the barge out to the ship. And not only that, it does benefit the community in some regards because it allows a facility to be further downstream, so in deeper water, which is something that's required in the future. The current facility is shallow, and because the water is decreased over time, it becomes problematic. And so it's been looked at, but it doesn't look overly practical, I would say.
And again, I think the most important thing is ultimately the absolute need to take into consideration the sensitivity of the area, of the river, of using the river, and how the Inuit feel about that. Ultimately, you know, there's a lot of fishing that goes on these two rivers, and you're talking about areas where the salmon spawn, etc. So it's sensitive. It also doesn't really open up the area in the way that our road does. And our road, the PFS route, also follows essentially a trail that's used by the Inuit in the winter to go down to one of their favorite winter fishing lakes. In actual fact, on the day that we signed the letter of intent with the two Inuit corporations, the Nayumavik and the Makavik, one of the Inuit elders sitting next to me, Sandy George, said, you know, we just used that trail. I used that trail, he said, to rescue an Inuit family who were fishing at Lac Lemoyne. And they called up on the shortwave radio and said one of their snowmobiles had died. And now you're talking about, you know, 30 below zero, and one of their vehicles has died as they've been out ice fishing. And so he said, yeah, I had to go along that route, that trail, to essentially rescue this family. So it also, this is another fundamental aspect of the road that we set out. Yes, it helps all of the potential projects in the area, but it's also a route that was laid out by the Inuit to get to Lac Lemoyne.
Yeah, I've traveled that road a number of times for commerce on snowmobile, moving machinery, getting things into camp.
If we have a moment, I have a question that's been put to us by Rainier, if you're ready. He asks, where do you think the funding for the PFS will come from? Is Glencore a possibility? Chris?
I would say, you know, the interesting thing about Glencore and Norfolco Sales is that their interest in us came about completely out of the blue, to be honest. And Darren and Murray and our team were working in 2014, 2015 on looking at different locations for our downstream hydromet facility. And one that had been identified, which is not on the list anymore, by the way, but it was in Belledune, outside of Belledune in New Brunswick. And part of the interest in it was it was a great industrial site, which is essentially owned by Glencore. And so Darren and I had a meeting with Glencore at their Brunswick smelter, which is a lead nickel smelter. And a very pleasant meeting. And we did a short presentation on the Ashram. And the guys at Glencore were like, you have fluorspar? And I was like, yeah. That was 2015, June of 2015. So in less than a year, we had signed the MOU we have with Norfalco Sales, which gives us a deep discount on the acids we would use in our downstream hydromet facility, hydrochloric sulfuric, in exchange for their opportunity to market our Fluorspar byproduct. So yes, I would say that is a possibility. Besides that, the financing for the pre-fees, it could come from several areas, but ideally, you know, something non-dilutive in terms of a project level investment is arguably the most attractive. And, you know, historically, those kinds of deals have been done between, you know, Canadian companies and industry players like Mitsubishi and Copper Mountain, POSCO and Fortune, et cetera, et cetera. And those are very attractive deals. And certainly, since we have economics released on both projects, we have been working on fostering those relationships since those economics were released. However, as I said at the beginning, you know, the rare earth element prices have been falling. So for a buyer of rare earth elements, you know, I would suggest, didn't feel the need to partner with somebody up until more recently. And again, that anxiety, that interest has probably never been higher than it is right now.
Thanks, Chris.
You are welcome.
I just want to point out just another comment on that river. There are, because of the dams, there's and the water reduction, there's a lot of rapids along it as well. So it creates sort of an issue with barging up that river rapids at several locations.
Well, I don't know if this is the end of it, and I know Dave wants to say a few words to wrap things up, but let me say it's been a pleasure being part of this today. Thank you so much for coming to this Zoom meeting, this update on the macros and the micros of the rare earth element sector and for Commerce Resources. Certainly, Justin, myself, and Darren are available on Skype. And certainly happy to answer any other questions that you might have following this meeting or at any time, and any questions on any of the news releases we have out. So thank you once again.
So on behalf of Zimtu Capital Corp, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. This has been a very successful event for us and hopefully for you as well. Thanks for coming. We'll be in touch when the next Zimtu Zoom call is coming to a screen near you. Thank you.